inspections happened.
Well, yesterday's Las Vegas attack has left our nation traumatized yet again. Dealing with how one could carry out such a horrific act can be difficult to grasp. Well, joining us this morning to talk about it is Dr. Nancy Zarse from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
You know, a lot of people wondering what is going on in the mind of somebody that just, and you can't even say this person snapped, because this was one of those situations where he had several days to change his mind and cool down, and it didn't happen. He was determined to do what he did, this horrific incident. What's going on in that mind?
Well, typically what we see with some of these mass casualty violent extremists is a quest for personal significance. They have a desire to matter, and they are willing to achieve that even through infamy. They combine that with grievances and sense of injustices and a pro-violence attitude. So these are people who decide that violence is a legitimate means to accomplish their ends.
You know, we've heard from his brother, we've heard from his ex-wife, everyone saying pretty much the same thing. This is so out of the blue. He displayed no evidence to their eyes at all that he would commit such a heinous act. That said, his father, Benjamin Hoskins Paddock, was on the FBI's most wanted list from 1969 to 1977, diagnosed, these are their words, as psychopathic. Is that not some sort of red flag?
Not in the father, no.
Not in the father.
And I can't speak to this specific case, but what I can say is general is we want to talk to witnesses that have current and relevant information. So if we have somebody who hasn't had contact with an individual for a decade, that's not current and relevant information. Psychopathy is not necessarily, as far as we have identified at this point, a genetic trait. What we do want to look at are the risk factors for the individual. We want to look at things like, we know there are key risk factors: age, 15 to 24. That's unusual here. Male, gender, previous violence, psychopathy, alcohol, and drug use. But what we also see, and this is something you commented on, is that there was a progression. When people engage in predatory violence, there is a progression through a pathway to that violence.
What do you mean?
So it starts with grievance, which is a sense of injustice, real or perceived, that must be avenged. But a lot of us have grievances, and there's a lot of legitimate ways to address those. The second stage is ideation. This is where someone decides that violence is the only means by which to avenge that injustice. And once we've made that decision, we're closer to the act. Then they go to research and planning, where they start to gather information, like maybe they do surveillance or make suspicious inquiries.
Does he ask specifically for that room?
Correct. They maybe pick a date, or they pick a specific target. The fourth stage is preparation, where they now start to gather the items. So maybe they gather weapons, ammunition, they target practice, perhaps on moving targets. We saw this in the Columbine shooters with the Rampage Rage video, where they were now practicing with sawed-off shotguns on moving targets. The fifth stage is where we have breach, a breach of security, and the sixth is attack. You notice the first two you don't necessarily see. The third and the fourth stages are visible, they're public, people can identify them.
All we can do is speculate about a motive. No manifesto that we can find, nothing left behind. Do you think we will learn more about what was in his mind with regard to perhaps that group of people, or whether or not this was just random and a statement of violence?
Again, not so much this individual, but in general, what we see as loss is a significant precipitant for violence and a sense of humiliation. So I wonder if typically in mass casualty events, if those are some of the things that we see in the past of the individual, and they decide that this act is a way to achieve infamy or to avenge that injustice.
Dr. Nancy Zarse, I could talk to you forever,
no
because this is such an interesting subject, and we're going to have you come back on again. I love how you put it all and laid it all out.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Let's send it over to Mike.
Definitely interesting insight. Good morning, everybody. Looking at the visible satellite picture